Okay, I'll just do roll call really quickly. Ariana here, Megan absent, Tahisha absent, Herman absent, Anna here, Nancy absent, and Ian.
Here.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, the document on the screen.
Yeah, and
Oh, sure. Supply audio. I think I'm Sheridan. I work as an architect in the city. Here representing myself. Do primarily multifamily residential work. With a lot of like analysis involved. Prior to doing multifamily work, did a good healthy mix of a lot of different residential or retail and commercial spaces, both interior and new commercial centers kind of all over the world. So here's more just a data analysis of what is available online that I'm able to aggregate and present to you. CV3, so next page. So this chart and the next 5 pages of this PDF are showing what in yellow was previously allowable before CVS for economic opportunity, and in blue what is now allowable. These are on the left side here are the zoning districts that are in your community board, both as proper zoning districts as well as overlays on top of residential. And then this top row here notes what was previously allowed as a use group in CVS, so you can kind of check against that if you're not familiar with that code. One thing that is formalized in the CVS for economic change zoning is the commercial, non-conforming commercial uses in residential districts. Previously, if they weren't open for more than 2 years, they couldn't be used ever again. They had to be converted into residential. Now they can be used. They can go under their current on record CFO, but they also have the option to change that use through the DOD process to a new C1 allowable commercial use. So that kind of bar in green here is all the allowable uses within non-conforming the commercial space. Regarding concerns that came up for those uses for noise in the neighborhood, for eating drinking establishments, as part of the zoning resolution text, there's a portion that talks about if you have events and you're charging for customers to come as like part of a show and stuff, they have to all be contained within the building. They can't have outdoor events in the rear yard of the commercial residential district. So that helps address some of the noise issues. There's another kind of overlay on top of that that's outside of zoning text. That's just noise ordinances for the neighborhood and 301 complaints that you can file. Another part that's new for CVS on this front page is agriculture. Primarily, I guess, for this kind of scale of available commercial space, it could be cannabis use. But cannabis is not allowable in C1 and C2 districts. So that's kind of outside of this bar, so it's any more heavily commercial districts. So not quite next to regular assumption neighborhoods. But you can grow various other things that was somehow an economically viable option. So next page.
And let me know if you want me to zoom in on anything.
I think we can zoom in if there's something that you. I guess I can speak to just what's here on the slide. So this is all kind of use group 6 stuff, which was like small scale residential retail that was allowable pre-CVS. Not too much of a change. There were some kind of annoying distinctions between C1 and C2 culturally for commercial retail environments. So now consumer goods rentals, general rentals, the complaint was that the same neighborhood, the same kind of urban fabric, seemingly randomly had a C1 on one side and a C2 on the other side. So the kind of example was that you could buy a bike on one side of the neighborhood, but you could only repair the bike on the other side of the street. So now that can just happen on one store and one space. It does expand general rentals. There was concern about Joko delivery, and where's that, what kind of use group does that qualify as, and where it's allowable. As far as I can understand it, Joko is a bike rental company that rents bikes to people who could do delivery services if they choose. It's a commercial, it's a membership based bike rental. So now that's allowable everywhere if it makes sense. I think there's one Joko bike store or rental space in the CB3 district. It's in a very kind of odd building. As I looked it up earlier, they didn't have a CFO, a lot of other stuff. So they're kind of like, I've been targeting more 1-story, 2-story conventional buildings that have no residential complaints above. They haven't really been targeting conventional buildings that have multi-stories. So if there's like a wonky 1-story building in CB3, that's kind of more the ideal building type for Joko, so they can have less concern with complaints and traffic for that living space. Next page. Nothing different here except from what was previously allowable, just to say that, you know, these kind of small scale resident or retail spaces can now go to the C1 district areas, so no real change to the community from there. And then next page. Same thing, so these are amusements, art galleries, other assembly spaces, micro distribution facilities, which is something that the city is pushing. It's kind of a new thing that was already underway pre-city, I guess. And again, how viable that is commercially for like a high cost rental space, probably not so much. So it might be, if it was going to be anywhere, it would be somewhere in like a M1 district along water, less likely to be in the kind of dense area. Next page, please. Here's the big change to CDVS as far as what's been promoted. And besides the convenience of C1, C2, the other big change is allowance with restrictions on small scale production facilities, ranging from everything from food to non-alcoholic beverages, tobacco, textiles, apparel, footwear, wood products, chemical, paper. So all this stuff used to be shoved into M1 and to M3, which, you know, maybe made sense at the time, but now there's a feeling that with these, so there are restrictions for that. So for example, like a bakery before could have a very small retail footprint of like a 750 square foot, which should be a quarter the size of this room. Now that can go up to 3,000 square feet within a C1, C2. So that makes it more viable as a product. There was talk about, from what's allowable here, can any of these businesses start to activate, at least as a commercial venture, kind of dead storefront and dead commercial space, as a way to support the very dense, very active restaurant activity in the area. So technically that is possible. So these manufacturing uses, they wouldn't be able to sell other people's goods, they would only be able to sell what is produced there if they were going to have their own storefront. And they could sell those products also to other supporting retail spaces within the neighborhood. So so I say this, the C1, C2 and agriculture are big ones. The other one that was touted a lot was laboratory space. And so previously, if you had very small scale medical or dental fabrication or laboratories, now you can expand that to be still very restrictive, you know, nothing explosive, but you can kind of expand what's allowable as laboratory space. So that could tie in some way, possibly, to something that is supportive of NYU or Cooper Union spaces, if that's an option. But yeah, I wouldn't say there are restrictions in place, so that it's not putting anyone in danger. They're just kind of a realization of what the actual risks are for the use type and expanding it to try to create more opportunity around the city. So I think it's also just how can you kind of create serendipitous interactions more, you kind of can provide more opportunities for these different use groups, such as laboratory space for manufacturing. You can kind of get some potential compounding use of people meeting each other who are of like an allied industry type and helping to build maybe some culture that wasn't previously available before. So that's kind of the end of this part. The next page would show more of the planning. So this is a planning map using publicly available data aggregated onto a map here. These blue areas are existing mixed use, like commercial or residential or commercial buildings that are within completely residential districts, so they're not conforming uses. These reds and oranges out here are existing commercial use buildings within allowable commercial building districts. And then these overlays here is the green and magentas. Those are overlays on top of the residential districts that also allow for commercial. So the only ones that are not conforming are kind of the mid blocks typically. You're going to kind of summarize it, and the avenues are typically conforming uses, which makes sense. So the next page. This is a bit more data to have in hand and something for you to think about as an advocacy effort. There is a resiliency project underway on the East River. That's not factored into this flood zoning data that's provided here. The dark purple is FEMA's published 2015 100-year flood, and this lighter pink is New York City zoning's extension of that 2015 floodline using data globally provided, and then a little bit tailored to the specific Atlantic coastline to talk about storm surge as it relates to our coast and how sensitive it could be. So this doesn't take into account the resiliency projects underway. That would, because that data is being that would require probably FEMA coming back out, observing the and it's not for deployment, it's more like physical permanent structures is what FEMA would consider as actual flood prevention. And then from there, this data would be a knock-on effect to that again. So if for some reason FEMA said, okay, now the flooding is maybe contained on the shoreline, the New York City data as a factoring in sea level rise would just be a small potential impact. In contrast, this light blue, dark blue, and yellow orange color is also data from New York City that's pulling from stormwater ability of existing stormwater infrastructure to drain. So it's nothing really related to the coastline. It's just saying that more flooding is going to happen. It's going to be harder for the stormwater. The more stormwater is going to come in as a volume. It's going to be harder for that stormwater to get out to the river. There's more frequency, it's more saturated, so there's just going to be, this is kind of the condition you'll have potentially in 2080. So this is a city infrastructure based issue. It has nothing really to do with the shoreline. So I have a project right now that's like in the middle of Queens, not next to any FEMA map, and we have serious nuisance and severe stormwater flooding issues. So nuisance flooding is like heavy rain comes by. Because of the inability of the infrastructure to drain that rain, there's a 4 to 12 inch flood area. And then a heavier rain, something like a multi-day event, that would be higher than 12 inches. So that kind of affects this 10th Street and Avenue C area pretty strongly. Again, this is a city-based problem that could be could be updated or addressed with better infrastructure, stormwater detention on the site. So that's for the north half of CB3, and then the next page. And so the north half is more dominantly residential based. South half Particularly Chinatown, Little Italy area, commercially based as you move east past Essex becomes more residential. So there's less of that kind of non-conforming what can happen here kind of idea. There are options for anyone from NYCHA to start thinking about potential different retail spaces that you could have in your campus. At least within what's already under CFO, but for another time. So yeah, I think there have been activations along here for like art house events. So that it's in regards to like kid friendly programming, that was one of the questions that we could encourage here. It's as far as I've seen new kid friendly oriented retail spaces, it's been just kind of like these art activations for springtime, you can go into this big warehouses and have some art experience. Beyond that, I think it's still largely dominated by like a 20-somethings crowd of retail experiences that doesn't quite allow for a lot of diversity. So next page would show the same kind of lighting overlay on top of this. So there's a big line along here between Houston and Delancey. And the same kind of flooding you saw kind of tapers down along here. So yeah, so the big U residency project will permanently address that once it's completed, but at the moment it's kind of a high risk area for flooding, as you guys know. So that's the extent of this portion of the study. The next portion that's not to be completed in the next couple of months would be to think about what, based off of what you see that's allowable in the city of Yes, what kind of new opportunities you might want to encourage within the community district that could allow for more diversity of uses. There's an effort underway to chart and potentially map some areas that have vacant retail as a kind of aggregate. So you can sort of see where there might be more density of that and on certain avenues or streets. And with just a kind of appeal and support stated from the community board for whatever you guys can do within your power to help encourage uses that you want to see in those vacant areas or new use types that you feel you could encourage or help to coordinate. One idea being like for these product manufacturings, it could be skewed towards artisanal type stuff, and community board could help set up different kind of art fair events to support that as a recurring event. I mean, it's well known that a lot of kind of the street closure, art activation, commercial activation is happening in the Chinatown district. It's a well organized business development group. It's more just trying to get, in my thinking, more trying to get my understanding of the conversation, how to activate those kind of get the same kind of spatial experiences to happen along the Bowery and Lower East Side area. So that's to be determined. It would just be from the viewpoint of the study, kind of speculative editorial imagery, and with some data to support ideas of what could be here and why it might be a good idea, but it's not going to be a comprehensive urban planning proposal for that second half. And the idea then is that with the editorial kind of documentation, it could be shared and you could kind of gauge interest from various big groups or retail organizations to get more of those different diverse uses activated within the community district. So that's kind of more the area outside of our control. We can speculate and provide ideas for what could happen. This is definitely hard data that you can use and share and keep. And I think you can update as you need to. If you wanted to, I could show you how to get the data yourself from open data source. This is using a free software as well. So everything in here is kind of free for anyone to use, download and map yourself. So I'm all for kind of community board empowerment and those sort of things. So I try and engage you on that. Yeah, so that's that for me. If there's any questions about it.
Thank you, Chris. And again, just to reiterate, maybe for those online and here, so we solicited Chris's help with this study. Right now, phase 1 is being completed, which is what he just presented today. And I think what we want to do here, as part of the committee is determine in terms of next steps, do we all agree it's useful to proceed with looking at vacancy rates, maybe identifying specific corridors such as the Bowery, such as Avenue C or D that have these higher vacancy rates to try to promote some of these new uses within them. And that's kind of what we're envisioning here. But obviously want to collect feedback, not just from the members, but if anybody online as well has ideas. And I did have a couple questions for you, Chris, if nobody wants to jump in first. You mentioned for the JOCO, so was it that it was a limited use before the economic, or they could still be in terms of where they can be located, it hasn't changed?
The big change is that it can be in C1.
Okay,
So previously it was only C2, so where that has the most effect, I guess, so let's go back one page. So C1 is an overlay was like this one here. C2 they could already do, so anything in magenta was possible here, and then C4, C6, that was all, they could do it kind of anywhere in here.
okay,
So yeah, I'd say like the new use is kind of the non-conforming and these C1 green overlays.
okay, but based on what you said, it doesn't seem like they're really interested in those areas regardless, so might not have a big impact in terms of opportunity.
Yeah, and it seems that the building type is looking for a very low rent
Mm-hmm.
possible, like the landlord is just trying to get somebody in there. And also have minimum interference with anybody above. One thing that's noted, I think, is anyone who's renting in a building that has a commercial use of the base, the landlord has to notify incoming tenants. So I'll just say that perhaps it's not very appealing to people who are renting, not that we had much choice at 2% vacancy, but I think it's trying to target buildings that are very low rent and have minimal noise and complaints from residents above. So a small limited use case.
Okay, and then so for the sections that are in white, that you mentioned, that these are the non-conforming buildings. I'm curious to know, so the non-conforming in the NYCHA,
Here?
yeah, exactly, in the Lower East Side. Why is it that those are non-conforming? Do you know specifically, or?
I could look up what I think it's just the zoning use changed over time. Basically what I did is I took a filter that any building type, like these kind of building types, any of these building types that were within an R use district would get a blue. So that's just kind of aggregate data. And then if I wanted, I could kind of pull out the C of O's for these buildings to identify what the use is and what the current zoning is for these different little lots here. But I think, yeah, so I think that non-conforming is just because it was previously allowable, and then at some point the zoning changed and now it's a non-conforming use.
Okay, I see, so there must have been some sort of commercial presence there already, and then now it's just updated with like the rest of the rules.
Right.
Okay. And then I think the last question I had is, so the non-commercial residential areas that are in white, does that mean that there's no commercial activity there as of right now? Or just, okay,
That's right, so everything that is within the current data that has only single family, multifamily, this one is a school, so like anything that's institutional or manufacturing, some of the M1 uses kind of here. So those are all, as these buildings currently exist and as they're currently used, they're not used for commercial retail purposes.
okay.
I'm absolutely making you repeat some things that you've already said, so I apologize. But we're the vacant lots and vacant buildings. What exactly are the pieces of data that we're collecting to understand what's causing the vacancy?
Causing vacancy is a big question mark for everybody.
But are we collecting like tax rates? Are we collecting particularly common landlords or all those things?
We can try that. Each landlord will typically create a shell company
Right.
just for that property.
Yep.
So you can get maybe if one of these has a vacant lot or a vacant use. Maybe that landlord has 5 buildings, so you could then identify the
Right.
5 buildings that person owns.
'Cause through Acres, can't you see who's registered at the shell company?
Yeah.
typically?
Yeah, you can.
Okay,
So yeah, you can pull names, so you could, yeah, technically you can overlay names and vacant lots.
right.
And just, you have like a big list of.
So do you think, and that and the tax rate, because I know a lot of the vacant lots here are registered to like. Not that I happens to own a bunch of vacant lots and things like that, where they're not paying taxes. Are we collecting that information as well, just to understand places that have stayed vacant for a long time?
We can try, it's not very easily collectible for me.
Okay.
So that might be kind of outside of an easy reach kind of wheelhouse for this specific study,
Got it.
but yeah, I think that's like a next year goal to go very deep into vacant lots and study, like, that could be its own kind of thing.
And Hannah, just to jump in, those are great questions because that was something we discussed pretty heavily when we were starting the project. It was like, when we were identifying these vacancies, can we map it out to specific landlords to see what maybe there's a correlation, or if there's something driving that, if there are certain people that are holding these lots or these spaces empty. And so what we want to do first is first mapping out the overall vacancies based on the
Yes.
kind of like live database the city has. From there, we're gonna try to see if there's specific corridors that have more on average vacancy rates than the rest of the district. And then the next step that we're trying to think of there is exactly what you said, is identifying who exactly owns these plot of lands. I don't know if it'll be fully what Chris is able to do, but it's something that we want to use this study to kind of as a next step.
My big concern about this stuff in a silo is that without knowing who the owners are, how they're taxed, and what the incentive is to leave it vacant, it's not super actionable.
Right.
Right. And then the last question,
Sure.
will we have information on how long they've been left vacant?
I don't know, the big source for this stuff is from Pluto. Pluto can do the names, I don't know if they can. If the public data allows for the, how long they've been vacant, I know that a lot of commercial developers have that kind of data, they can find, see like from their own programming. So that's like a private, that's a closed data source, I don't have direct access to that, I can like. Call some favors to get like general vacant lot data, but if somebody who does that kind of stuff all the time, they would have that as part of their like daily use programming that they use.
Right.
So yeah, so for me, it's gated. I can get aggregate data easily.
Because that seems also like super helpful context if we could have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, but the people that would have that data. Are also working in that zone, so they may be less inclined to, yeah, so there's a, for me, I don't have a strong force in the commercial retail space. I also don't have the data program available. For people that's like their everyday use, they, you know, there's a conflict of them wanting to shame a developer that they might also have, like Mount Sinai. They also do a lot of work with, so.
Right.
So it's hard to maybe get those two fully aligned, but the data is technically there, just not, it's privately.
Right, and then for the proprietors, those pieces of data are public,
Yeah,
but they're just a little labyrinth to get
you
to,
can,
right?
that is. Like a maybe like a mid-tier branch to achieve, it'd be hard to maybe. Use that data, source that data, you can put in Excel and maybe you could try to find like hits of different names that you have on a column. Like you could have the count, so I've done that kind of Excel programming before, but it would be hard to, in aggregate, have that and find it usable unless you knew how to like really use Excel. So that my thing, maybe you already do, maybe I just don't have the Excel genius, but yeah, so if I was going to get a whole list of vacant lots with the second layer names. It will take some time to try to sift through that and provide useful data from that block. But just, yeah.
And just so I have it in my notes correctly, the things that you're most concerned about is ownership, how long they've been empty for, and you said taxes was the third, okay.
So there-
Just as far as I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I can tell, the taxation status of the property is probably, seems to be the most likely thing to incentivize someone to leave it vacant. So if
Do you
you
know off the top of your head if universities are also fall into that same bracket as like Mount Sinai?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's registered to a nonprofit, so there's like a couple, like almost entire blocks I can think of that are registered to either a university or a hospital in this district that are just have been open for 7 years.
Maybe if you know those already, if you could share it also with us, like over email, if there's specific ones, just because we're trying to highlight these.
One across the street from me on 13th between first and second drives me nuts. Just sitting there.
They're for the private sector people, I don't know if that was in our conversation or not, but there's some tax write-off loophole that's up for review right now in the New York State. So currently, I think private owners can take a loss for a vacant lot as part of their business formula, so.
Yeah, there's a couple I've seen on Second Avenue where I've looked into it as well, because there's entire buildings that are left vacant. And when I looked into it, they're able to write off the entire building as tax write-offs. They've been left vacant for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's fun.
So yeah, in terms of advocacy, that could be maybe a more impactful
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah, that's great. Ian, do you have anything more?
I'm very new to this, but it sounds to me like there's potentially two general groups of like activities the community board could be doing. One is like trying to draw in new development. The other is addressing the folks who are already there. So on that second part, when you said non-conforming spaces, those are currently non-conforming after CAS changes, is that right?
They'll always be non-conforming as long as they're in the residential zoning.
Okay.
But before, if that non-conforming use went dormant for 2 years, that was it, like it couldn't be reactivated.
Right.
Now they're saying, okay, what's a good idea? Let's allow this to be useful again as commercial spaces. You can reactivate the existing CFO, as long as it's current. And if you wanted to change that use type, anything within that C1 use group is allowable. Or anyone with that C1 zoning is allowable. So that's like the big change.
Are you aware of any outreach the city is doing to existing homeowners or?
I know there was another, when they were promoting it, they came through the different community boards to share what was being changed. They probably also connected with any kind of citywide business groups. I don't know if they've been really targeting individual owners. In aggregate it'd be hard to do, but
It sounds like that's our job.
that's I'm not aware of it.
Okay, and I don't know if anybody in the public or on Zoom has any questions. If not, we'll probably wrap up this section.
I just want to remind just one person, Lucas, I think. If you want to speak, you need to raise your hand and then we will allow you to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Lucas.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Just so some context, who I am. I'm actually a graduate student at NYU pursuing a master's degree in real estate development. I have a course where we were assigned to join a community board meeting, so that's why I'm here. Also, I happen to be a resident of the neighborhood. I live on Ludlow Street, so super interesting. But just wanted to let you guys know who I am. And thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for joining.
Sound like a main source for that information. I think you got it, don't you? Alright, maybe not, but yeah, so that someone like that, and not a person, that would be a great partnership. They have that data in aggregate. It's gated for its resident use, they could practice development, finding, building a case for why certain retail commercial spaces should happen in certain developments. So that's all part of their training. And if there's a way to build that partnership, it's there for you to learn from.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, and then so our next topic for tonight is the resolution. So we had Cooper Square Committee come present to us about 2 or 3 months ago now about concerns of high levels of commercial tenant harassment within the district. There is currently no agency within the city that tracks this in the way that there is for tenants, for residential tenants. And so they're trying to create and pass some legislation that would essentially assign one of the city agencies to begin tracking this in order to have better data and to understand what people are facing within the district. I have a draft resolution for us to go through and for the committee members to have any comments on. But I know that Dennis, you are here for this, so if you have any questions for us, we're happy to speak on it. But this was a effort that was brought to us by the Cooper Square Committee, and that's why we're drafting a resolution on the subject.
I have a question about the complaints. Is it complaints of harassment against the businesses or from the businesses?
Against the businesses, sorry, from the businesses. Yeah, so it's commercial tenants that are having issues with their landlords. At time it could be neglecting maintenance, especially commercial tenants that have been there for a long time. There are basically a lot of different ways that at times landlords aren't fulfilling their duties to these commercial tenants. It could be something like not having the heater on during the winter, and that maybe has an impact on the clientele that will be coming in and out, or a number of things. So these are complaints from commercial tenants against their landlords that aren't being tracked.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I know we've lost commercial tenants, which were basic skill tenants.
Mm.
On our buildings, when our landlord died, his son flipped the buildings. In that area, in that intersection, we had 4 printing companies. Offices, and 2 of them printed on site. They're all gone. On Monroe Street, they had commercial glass business, had a big heavy truck for big glass. And they're gone. There's a bar there. Taiwanese beauty shops gone, she retired. But we have a saturation of bars at that one intersection. And the beer and wine was just as bad as NOP. I noticed from your presentation stipulations about special events closing the doors. But realistically, I mean, the people are gonna come out and smoke. And they're gonna be coming and going, the door's gonna be open for music, and that's what happens to them. I don't want to go off the subject of tonight's content, but yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. And actually something that might be useful as well is these are topics that are oftentimes discussed in our SLA committee. So that's where we talk about liquor licenses, and that obviously impacts all the bars and restaurants. We try to push for stipulations to help mitigate some of these factors that,
Yes, I understand that, but my comment is that the stipulations are not enforceable, and it's not realistic.
Thank you.
I think there's an interesting connection there about collecting more data around like building sale and ownership and how that impacts like business potential. I'm not sure if it's of interest to anyone or anything, but.
Well, thank you both. So I don't know, Oren, if you can share the draft resolution on the screen. So this is the draft resolution. I'll give you guys a minute to read through it. Really a lot of the stats that we have here, since it's not being collected by the city, is through different surveys and studies that have been done. But essentially what we're asking for is, like I mentioned earlier, for there to be a designated agency to track these complaints. You guys can let Oren know when to scroll down. Any comments? Okay, perfect. If there's no comments or feedback, we'll consider it as passed if we all vote yes later on. It might still have to go through the full board meeting. Unfortunately for the actual resolution, we can't take direct feedback from the public, but since we are a small group, please feel free to just share if you had any concerns.
My question was, is there particular businesses that are focused to this, or that are complaining?
No, for this,
There's a cross section that are complaining, owner harassment, building owner harassment.
in terms of owner harassment, so it's kind of hard to gauge because there isn't any formal data on it right now. I think what from the studies that have been heard and what Cooper Square Committee has been hearing, it's a lot of times it's small business owners and a lot of immigrant owners who maybe don't have as much legal resources or familiarity with the different rules that are available to them. That was what was told to us, but I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what type of services they provide. Okay, great. No comments here, then I'm going to keep it pushing to item number 4, which is our district needs statement. So this is going to be the first review that we do for this year's district needs statement. I don't think it's been updated for a couple of years, so I went ahead and updated some of the figures that were originally presented, but we still are pending feedback from the bids, what they want to highlight in their sections. And obviously we'll keep discussing this through the fall before we finish publishing it. I think it's in October. Yeah, in October. I don't know if you have that one. So I'll walk us through. So this is the new version. The old version, like the 2024 version, is available online if you guys want to look through it. But essentially, before it very heavily focused still on the effect of the pandemic and how that kind of impacted our district. What I did is I removed some of the wording that was very specific to COVID-19, as I think, 5 years later, there have certainly been changes and a lot of recovery since. So what I highlighted is the latest data in terms of sectors that are considered as fully recovered or even beyond pre-pandemic levels versus the ones that are still struggling, which is retail, arts, and entertainment. Certainly has an impact on our district, as well as highlighting some overall unemployment trends. Since the pandemic, the one that was highlighted by EDC at least is that Latino unemployment rates remain higher than pre-pandemic levels versus for other groups, it's recovered or is better than pre-pandemic. In terms of this sustained loss of independent mom and pop stores providing a variety of goods and services in CD3 prior to the pandemic, this is language that I haven't changed. It's been there for a while now in our district needs statement. I would love your feedback on whether you guys think we should include it or modify it or expand on it. Moving further down, I did pull some of the retail chain data that was published at the end of last year. Something to note here is that there's been a net loss of retail stores in Manhattan, in particular in CD3 for the East Village. It actually was second highest of all zip codes in the city in terms of a drop, but even despite that, we're still the third highest in overall quantity of retail and chain stores in the district. The paragraph under that was kind of standard as well. Again, this is just mentioning the historic fabric of the community and how retail stores might have an impact on that. Continuing on to merchants. So what I highlighted in yellow is what I asked the bids to update. We're still waiting for their updates just to see what their priorities and goals are going into this year and next. So once we have that, we will present it in the next Economic Development Committee. And then if you can scroll further down. Keep going. Yeah, down here. So these are the 3 kind of items we highlighted in the past. I haven't updated these because I think they're still relevant. The first is about continuing financial and programming support for the bids. The second is prioritizing adult education and job training, which has historically been a big priority for CB3. And then the last is continuing financial and programming support for local workforce development organizations. So we can keep these the same. I don't think that there's been a lot of updates or changes of this. If anybody wants to add something or has in mind things that maybe are missing and not being captured here, we can keep discussing it, not just today, but like in the next upcoming meetings, if you guys have any ideas on that. One thing that I was thinking that we could add here that isn't reflected is maybe more about an analysis on Essex Market. It's a big project, right? It does have an impact on economic development, and we've seen that, you know, the market line has failed. That's been empty for a couple months now. There are a lot of commercial spaces related to this project that are empty, including the office spaces. So I think maybe that's something worth highlighting here as well, of how can we help prioritize that and advocate for this space, since it was a big public-private partnership and something that our community board has worked really closely in terms of having this project succeed. So I'll pause there because I said a lot. I don't know if you guys have any first thoughts in terms of what we're including or something you'd want to add and modify.
Generally, I think all of this makes sense, but it does seem to be missing some of what we probably can't update until we get the city EBS report. But a lot of just, I think root causing some of the vacancies outside of just like, oh, cost is causing this, because that totally makes sense as a singular explanation would be incredibly helpful.
Okay, definitely can keep that in mind. I think there also, when we talk about economic development, the root cause of the vacancies, for basically just saying like, is it that there isn't like a will to rent those spaces out versus actual need? Okay.
Because I mean, otherwise they would lower the price, and they haven't, and there's a lot of spaces that have been vacant for years.
And I will say we've been speaking to the bids as well to see what they think of vacancy rates. I know that in Chinatown in particular, there's a lot of different reasons in terms of root causes that isn't just landlords not wanting to include it. There's a big saturation in terms of the type of commercial that is taking place. So I think Wellington Chen said very clearly, like, we can't have any more boba shops because there are a lot there. So I think for them, they're feeling that there's kind of a crux of what is attractive for people to open up there and how many already exist. So I know that was a concern they raised.
But I think just getting some data around that would be incredibly helpful.
Yep, point taken. And that's something that definitely the study will help us fill in some of the holes here. Okay, and I don't know, Ian, if you had any comments, suggestions. Okay, perfect. Anyways, this is a first draft, so I'll share it out again after today. We can't discuss outside of the meeting, but at least people can start thinking about what they want to see. Our next meeting probably won't be until the fall. So we'll have a couple months to figure out any changes that might be relevant for next year. And that's all I had for today. Thank you, Chris, for showing up and doing your presentation. Really helpful. We'll stay in touch and we can talk about next steps a little bit more, maybe after this call as well. I don't know if there's any last questions on Zoom. Otherwise, I think we can close out the meeting.
Regarding the job training, that's one of the changes for C1 uses. Previously it was a C2 thing, so if for some reason a small residential lot in a non-conforming space wanted to use that for job training, that's a viable now that was previously.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for that. Okay, great. Then I'll do a roll call. Ariadna here, Megan absent, Tahisha absent, Herman absent, Anna
Here.
Nancy absent, Guillermo absent, Ian.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you guys. And thank you, Oren, for sustaining the meeting.